Hi everyone, this is Instructor Hernandez, and I'm using this recorded lecture to discuss how you can revise your drafts for essay number 2. So as we have discussed, there are various stages of the writing process, and although on your screen you'll see what looks like a very linear process, as we know by now, it's not always this straightforward. Sometimes you may need to go back a step, sometimes you may need to repeat a step. So please take the time to do what is best for your essay. And remember that you can always ask for help from either myself or Stephanie or Sabina or a writing center tutor. So we've gone over the writing process before, and we've spent some time in class generating ideas. So I'm not going to go over that in a lot of detail today. We've also talked about how to develop a tentative thesis statement. And in looking at the drafts for essay number 2, I think the majority of the class understands now how to develop a thesis statement and what a thesis statement should look like. We weren't able to conduct a peer review in class for this essay. There is a peer review assignment on Canvas. And remember, you can also meet with Stephanie or Sabina or a Writing Center tutor to get feedback on your essay. I sent feedback to everyone that submitted a draft as well. So please make sure to review the comments that I gave you on your essay on Canvas. So keeping all that in mind, we're going to start at taking stock and revising, and also discuss editing and proofreading in this lecture. So remember, when it comes to taking stock and revising, you're considering the feedback that you were given on your essay. And even though you might be given feedback that you don't necessarily agree with, it's important to evaluate all the comments that you've received with an open mind, especially if you've received similar feedback from more than one person. So you want to think about which comments make the most sense to you. Not only which ones do you agree with, but do you see a pattern? Is a writing tutor and your instructor telling you the same thing, for instance? Also, what makes sense in terms of your essay? There may be some comments that you can disregard. So sometimes we'll get feedback that's more subjective. For instance, someone could suggest that you change the title of your essay, but if it's a title that fits your essay and your purpose and it's something that you like, then that may be a comment you can disregard. So after you've taken into account the feedback that you've been given on your draft, you want to keep in mind the goals of revision. Sometimes when we're given a lot of feedback, it can be a little overwhelming and we're not sure where to start. So remember that when you're revising, the purpose is to sharpen and polish what you already have done. Some writers at this stage may need to start their essay from scratch, but for the most part, I think mostly everyone has an essay that they can work with and revise to make better for the final draft. And you want to focus your attention on specific aspects of your essay, especially if you're pressed for time. You want to focus on the areas that need the most work before the final draft is due. So in looking at the drafts for this class, these are the areas that I suggest everyone should work on, because these are the most common areas that I saw in terms of needing improvement. But it's important to read your specific draft and the comments that I gave you, because there may be things that individual students need to work on that don't necessarily apply to the entire class. So I'm going to discuss each of these areas for improvement one by one, starting with development of ideas. So in terms of development of ideas, I've discussed this before. That refers to providing support for your ideas. In the first drafts, I will see a lot of different ideas that students can use in the final draft of their essay. And remember that I talked about being repetitive. So sometimes what happens is I'll see the same ideas being repeated, or I'll see claims being repeated, but it's important to move the discussion forward. So whenever you state a claim, keep in mind that you only need to state that claim once, and it also needs to be supported with evidence. So evidence can come from the book, it can come from personal experience. You can refer to specific examples that you've seen either on news networks or in social media, or you can also reference any of the class discussions that we've had. But it's important when you're looking at your essay, you notice where are you just repeating the same claim over and over, and where can you insert an example that would further explain the point you're trying to make. And if you ever get stuck, just keep in mind that in this type of essay, you should always be answering the questions how or why. So for instance, if you make the claim that social media posts should be regulated so people aren't posting fake news, then you want to follow that up with addressing how this can be done. So in other words, what can the social media sites do to better regulate users? How should they improve the regulations that are already in place? How would these regulations be enforced, and so on? And you can also address the question why. So why does this matter? If someone is posting fake news on social media, why should the rest of us care about that? In terms of citing sources, I did notice that there was a lack of citation in the preliminary drafts. And I also noticed that many of the essays are referring to sources that are not in the class textbook. So please remember for this essay, and the same was also true for essay number 1, you are only to refer to chapter 10 of America Now, which is on the news media. While it's great that some of you took the initiative to find outside sources, I can't verify the credibility of those sources. And we also haven't gone over research strategies in this class yet. So those are the reasons why for the first 2 essays, I only require that you cite from America Now. So take a look at your draft. If you are citing sources that are not in the textbook, then you need to remove those for the final draft and revise the paragraphs that those sources are cited in. If you don't have any sources cited in your essay, or you don't make any references to America Now, then those are definitely things you want to add for the final draft. And as we discussed with essay number 1, anytime you use a direct quote, that quote needs to be introduced with a signal phrase. And you can look at sample signal phrases in the Little Seagull Handbook. And I believe you've also gone over this in SI as well, and that you were given a handout. So please refer to that when you're revising your essay for the final draft. Finally, keep in mind that whenever you cite a source, you need to give credit to that source using an in-text citation. And this not only applies to direct quotes, but to paraphrases as well. For the final drafts, you should also make sure that your MLA format is correct. I don't expect the preliminary drafts to be in MLA format, but the final drafts definitely should be. So remember, when I say MLA format, I'm not only referring to the overall essay format, but also the way that signal phrases and in-text citations are formatted. And there's a specific way to do those things in MLA. So you can check the Little Seagull Handbook. There's an entire section on MLA. Or you can also look online at credible MLA sources. There are some on the CSUN Library website. You can also use the Purdue OWL, which has a very good section on MLA as well. When it comes to editing your paper, Remember, editing is when you look over your essay and you make changes for clarity. So some of you need to work on sentence structure. So whether that's run-on sentences, sentence fragments, or just sentences that were a bit unclear to me, those would be good sentences to review with either Stephanie Sabina or a writing tutor, especially if you're not sure how to fix a run-on sentence or how to make a sentence more clear on your own. Some other areas that I noted that would be good for you all to edit in your essay are incorrect capitalization. I was seeing words that were capitalized that didn't need to be, and vice versa. Also spelling. Sometimes when we're in a hurry and we're writing a draft, especially if it's close to the deadline, we can make typos or spelling errors. So if I noted in your essay that some words were spelled incorrectly, those are things that you want to make sure to go back and fix for the final draft. And lastly, any phrases or wording that I marked, either saying it was unclear or needed to be revised, those are definitely things you want to take a look at and make sure they're fixed for your final draft. And once again, it's difficult to learn how to self-edit our own writing. This is something that even experienced writers or professional writers will struggle with. So for this stage in the writing process, I highly recommend that you seek help. And remember that the Writing Center has grammar experts that are available to you in this class. And I've gone over in class how you can schedule an appointment with the Writing Center tutor, and specifically how you can request a grammar expert to meet with. If you don't remember how to do that, you can refer to the instructions on the extra credit page on Canvas, which is in the course materials module at the very top of the page. And you can always call the Writing Center, even though they do scheduling online and they want students to self-schedule. If you're not sure how to do that, you can always give them a call and they'll walk you through the process. So now that I've talked about specific issues in regards to essay number 2, I want to just remind you in general of the things that you should be redoing in the revising stage of the writing process. So as I talked about with essay number 1, you shouldn't just submit your preliminary draft as your final draft. Every essay that I read had work to do and could be improved in some way. So these are the common tasks that most people will be doing at this stage of the writing process: cut, add, or reorder. So if there are things to cut out of your essay, that would be a good step to take to get rid of material that might be repetitive or unnecessary. Also, if I told you, for instance, that your paragraphs need more focus, there could be sentences that you could omit from that paragraph, or phrasing that is a bit repetitive as well. Some students might even be advised to cut out entire paragraphs, especially if they're off topic or they don't respond to the writing instructions. But remember, I always advise students to save deleted material just until you submit your final draft, because there may be something that you do want to put back into your essay at some point. Some of you may need to add in more material. So if you were given feedback like you need to develop your ideas more, or you need to provide more supporting details, then this is a task that you definitely should be working on when revising your essay. And finally, reordering is also a common task when it comes to revision. So if I told you that one of your body paragraphs would actually make a really good introduction, then obviously you're going to be reordering the paragraphs in your essay. While others may need to reorder sentences within a paragraph if I said your paragraph needs more focus or organization. And remember, if there's a lot that you need to work with in your essay, it might be easier to just start on a blank document rather than working within your existing draft. So you can copy and paste content from your draft onto a blank document, but if you're reordering paragraphs or the structure of your essay, it can be a lot easier to just do this on a brand new document. So that's all I wanted to cover in this recorded lecture. As I mentioned, please take a look at the comments that I left on your draft for essay number 2 before you start revising. And I will be posting on Canvas some announcements for next week and the week after, since next week will be spring break. So please make sure to read the announcements and also reach out to me if you have any questions.